The honourable member from Stormont Dundas South Glengarry now has the floor for resuming debate. The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am proud to rise again in the House. It has now been over a month that the House of Commons has been paralysed. The government, the Liberals, are not able to advance a single piece of legislation in this House. Not complaining on that part, frankly, at the last 9 years in their record of a lot of things they've done. But the number one question that remains in my mind as I begin my comments here today, what are they hiding? What damning information about their unethical conduct when it comes to the $400 million Green Slush Fund is so bad they are willing to shut down regular business of Parliament to avoid the RCMP having all of the documents unredacted so they can complete a criminal investigation into the Liberal government's Green Slush Fund. The fact that I'm speaking again, that we are refusing to back down to the Liberals' demands that let's just push this over to a parliamentary committee to study and think about it, not handing it over to debate whether they have to or not. It makes you wonder why they are just willing to give up a month of time for their own business, their own agenda, to hide and cover up from the RCMP getting full and unvetted full access to vet all the documents in this. It's important, Mr. Speaker, to remind Canadians, like we have been doing, just the magnitude and severity of the unethical and inappropriate behaviour and use of taxpayers' money that the Liberal-appointed insiders gave themselves with this fund. The Auditor General, an independent office here in the work that we do in the House of Commons, came out with a stunning report at the magnitude. The first time, actually, it was actually a second more in-depth that was required to get to the magnitude for Canadians to understand just how corrupt this program was. Found that $59 million of this program was awarded to projects and companies that were ineligible to even receive it. But the worst part of all of this was the 186 cases where conflicts of interest existed. What do we mean by that? First of all, that comes to $330 million in funds, Mr. Speaker, that were awarded in cases where we had directors appointed by the Liberals on this Green Slush Fund board that were approving either their own projects, they were not recusing themselves, they were giving themselves a project and another director project, another director, 186 times. And here's the thing. This is a problem of this Liberal government, propped up by the NDP, by the way, for several years since we've known about this behaviour and corruption. This is a Liberal-induced problem. The program of SDTC's the acronym, has been a federal program that was actually created back in 2001 when Jean Chrétien was Prime Minister. The program operated under a Liberal government, under 9 years of a Conservative government, where the Auditor General found no such shoddy business and corruption. It was only in 2017 when they started to change over who the chair was and appointing their own members to the committee that these serious, serious problems in misuse of taxpayers' money started. The thing I find most insane, there's so many parts, I should say, that I find just asinine and insane when it comes to this issue and this scandal. But to be clear, the Liberals just brush this off and say, well, let's just take it to a committee and they'll think about it. They are not serious on tackling this problem at all. I want to go back to my time as an example in municipal politics. I had the honour of serving at the local level of government for 12 years in the township of North Dundas, 4 years as a councillor and 8 years as mayor for the township and a member of SD&G County Council. I had the honour of serving 2 years, 2 terms as the warden of SD&G. The oath that we take at the municipal level is to commit to declare any pecuniary interests, basically meaning conflicts of interest. Municipal politicians, staff, everyone, the number one thing in any orientation when we got elected to office at the beginning of every term, conferences, best practices seminars, meetings with our legal counsel and others, we were constantly reminded of the need to declare a conflict of interest. What we have here with this board, not only we have an ethics commissioner here in Ottawa that goes through ourselves as members and individuals appointed to boards, this is a basic 101 of board governance. You can't or shouldn't sit on a board that advances your financial interests directly, pecuniary interest. All of these terms are explained right at the onset. The individuals and the Liberal insiders, this isn't their first day on the job. May have been on the board, but they knew what they were doing the day that they got in here. And they go back and forth of improving 186 times projects where conflict of interest. And again, these are where the voting members of the Green Slush Fund are directors on the businesses and companies applying for money. And this wasn't just one or two times, oops, sorry, I forgot, we had a busy meeting that day and I forgot to recuse myself. It happened 186 times. And here's the thing, I went through here the Auditor General's report, just the insanity of all of this. They knew better. This wasn't a case of, oh, whoops, we didn't take the training. Anybody that's on a board in governance, any of the names that are mentioned where they're directors on these private companies, know the rules. It is ingrained in somebody. And here was the thing. They knew the rules. They didn't care. They got themselves in an incestuous circle of Liberal insiders, and they did it 186 times, $330 million worth of projects approved where this was there. They did not care. You can go through the Auditor General's report that lists in Exhibit 6.4 the list of cases. There are on the page here multiple pages, and I had to shrink the font on this just to fit it all in on the few pages that I've got. Exhibit 6.4 goes through the 90 cases of conflict of interest. In this case, is part of it here, $76 million. March 29th, 2021 was a pretty busy day at that board. It wasn't just one conflict of interest here or there. The chair, Annette Verschuren, $100,000 she voted to approve having a conflict of interest on that meeting date. She gave another one where she was on another company, the same day gave $100,000. The same meeting, Empowered, another company, got seed money of $100,000. Earlier, about a couple weeks earlier, on March 10th, 2022, a board member on the Green Slush Fund, who has also had a company in a conflict of interest, voted on March 10th, 2022, to give his company $5 million of taxpayers' money. There's 90 examples that go through, Mr. Speaker, the magnitude of the conflicts of interest and the corruption. I make the argument here that Canadians are rightfully frustrated. This isn't accidental. This isn't some sort of circumstance where, whoops, we didn't know the rules. They knew exactly what they were doing. So I am drawing my opinion here in the chamber. What has this House said? A majority of members said earlier this year, through a motion, that said the RCMP must have all of the documents and all of them unredacted. So at the end of the day, they do not get into a case where, based on the information we have and we were given, that we determined X. The majority of this House said, make sure, don't give an implication or an opinion, give them the documents for them to do their full criminal investigation. A criminal investigation, which they confirmed is underway, Mr. Speaker. Why is this important? For many reasons. It's just simple matter of fact. Give all the information for a full investigation. Leave no stone unturned. But let's go back and remember just a couple of years ago, this Liberal government and their record. On the SNC-Lavalin scandal the Prime Minister found himself in, It was the RCMP that says, based on the information we have, we did not proceed to lay charges. Interesting. They were not given all the information. Cabinet confidence and the Prime Minister blocked certain information to go to the RCMP for a full, talk about a conflict of interest there, for a full investigation. This Parliament reigns supreme, Parliament is paramount. Mr. Speaker, your ruling made that exactly clear. Parliament has the right to pass the motion and to have it enforced and have the government comply with it. And there should be no reason. They've tried to change their excuse over the course of the last month about 5 times, throwing whatever at the wall they can and hoping an argument sticks. Hasn't yet. Canadians want the RCMP to have the full information, to do a full and criminal investigation, and we do not want a conclusion again like we had only a couple years ago under this Prime Minister, where they do not have the information that they need. I think another part that's important here is actually talking about that past pattern of behavior, Mr. Speaker. We talk about ethics violations, bad behavior, not following the rules, and only admitting fault after they got caught and found guilty of the ethics violations. There have been several in the past 9 years under this government. Minister of Public Safety, found in violation of ethics laws. Minister of International Trade was a couple of years ago. And it was just last week the Liberal-appointed CBC president was found guilty of breaking ethics laws and was fined just last week. And believe it or not, say it's not so. Who is the one that's leading the pack? The Prime Minister himself, found guilty twice of breaking ethics laws. There's a pattern of behavior that Canadians are getting tired of. And for a government that came in back in 2015, open by default, sunny ways, they were going to change the way things are done in Ottawa. Did they change all right? And not for the better. They are so desperate to avoid accountability, to avoid transparency, to comply with what the majority of the House of Commons has said, to give all the documents for a full criminal investigation where no stone is left unturned. They are now so closed by default that they're closing their own business for the last month to avoid all this. And again, we talk about a pattern of behavior. A key thing for a government is trust, maintaining trust among Canadians. I've spoke about the SNC-Lavalin scandal. The We Charity scandal was another massive ethical challenge, corruption issue of Liberals working with Liberal insiders to benefit them at a time they said it was all about the youth during the pandemic. It was all about benefiting their friends, and they were caught for that. Talk about open by default and then not following through. The Winnipeg Labs documents. Years and years, a Speaker's ruling as well, the government refusing to provide full access to all documents so Canadians can see exactly what this government knew, when they knew it, and in the case of what we know, what they did not do to protect our national security and the Canadian people. Breaking trust, again, in a major way. And now we have, Mr. Speaker, last week we found out, as they advance to try to keep the NDP Liberal coalition alive, it is revealed now that the NDP were given special access to the Prime Minister's office and Privy Council office to change, or propose a bill to change Canada's elections laws. The bill is not about adding advanced poll dates. It's not about closing loopholes and foreign interference, because gaps still exist. It was about moving back the election date, just by a week, which just happens to have many NDP and Liberal MPs that would lose out on their pension by a day get their pension guaranteed because they know they're going to be defeated in the next election. It's on record, the NDP said this legislation was part of their deal to keep their coalition intact. And they wasn't going to keep them intact because Canadians want them to do that. The opposite. They're desperate to avoid Canadians having their say in a carbon tax election. But now we know why the deal was made. Not for advanced polls, not for any of the other technical measures. It was to protect the pensions of soon-to-be defeated. I say that. And the member from Kingston and the Islands says, here's the interesting part, saying protecting my pension.
That's right.
I'm not here for my pension, Mr. Speaker. I'm here for Canadians. And here's what I'm going to say is, I don't want to back the election up by a week. I want to call the election now.
Mass call members. I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member, but I'm going to ask the member from Kingston and the Island please to wait until we get to questions and comments in a few minutes, and we'll be more than able to ask a question of the honourable member. The honourable member from Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Intervention to bring some order in during my speech here. The interventions and the heckling does not bother. It reinforces just how tired and out of gas the Liberals are. They changed the date for the election to help me get my, absolutely ridiculous. They changed it to secure power and votes of the NDP to keep them in office and avoid having to go to an election. That is the fact, and they are sputtering trying to explain, and they're failing miserably at it. So those heckles don't discourage me. They reinforce the fact that they are desperately, desperately trying to change the channel from the numerous scandals that consume them. And I would be rattled too if I had to go to people in Kingston as a Liberal MP for the last 9 years and answer for the number of ethical violations that they have, of why they won't show $400 million corruption scandal and provide all the documents to the RCMP, and why they are so desperate that they'll work with the NDP to protect the pensions of soon-to-be defeated NDP and Liberal MPs. I'm very confident to go to the people of Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry right now. I think what's disgusting is, again, the eroding trust. There's very little left after 9 years, and every week Canadians are growing sick and tired of the endless desperation of Liberal and NDP MPs. So I don't worry about anything else but having an election right now for Canadians to have their say, which they desperately, desperately want. And on the other side, they should be ashamed and embarrassed of what got exposed last week. They gave the NDP special secret access to meetings in advance of proposing a bill to change the election laws to keep themselves in power. They got caught, and they should be rightfully embarrassed and rattled about that. We go back at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, this issue, again, the latest scandal of waste and mismanagement and corruption, happens because Liberals are terrible managers when it comes to the federal government. I could be hours on end outlining the numerous examples, the Auditor General reports that have come in the last couple of years alone, the ones at Public Accounts and other committees that are underway and getting more information on the magnitude and depth of their incompetence. The $400 million was meant for green technology, a good buzzword to Liberals, and they're virtue signaling. We talk about virtue signaling. Why is that? Because they say all the right things, they get A for announcements, but there is zero depth to the reality and their ability to deliver. The only thing they've delivered is 186 cases of conflict of interest totaling $330 million to Liberal insiders and giving $59 million to ineligible projects that didn't even meet it. It's not about green technology. It's not about the environment. It's not about Canadians. It's about lining the pockets of their friends. That defeated, 20 years ago, the last Liberal government. And it is going to be one of the many factors that defeats this one. They have doubled the amount in 9 years under this NDP Liberal government of going to $21 billion a year on consultants and outside contractors. We're seeing numerous cases, the Arrive Can $60 million, $400 million here, completely inappropriate use of taxpayers' money. And Mr. Speaker, as I wrap up my comments, I want Canadians to reflect on this. They've been made aware now, since whistleblowers came forward a couple of years ago, in this case, of the Green Slush Fund. If they took this issue seriously, They would not be shutting Parliament down for the last month to avoid accountability. They would not be dithering and delaying from just cooperating. And the money, if they're so serious about taxpayers' money and respecting it, how much money has been returned of the $400 million to date? $0. And that's why they have zero credibility left in this House. Thank you.